How you doing, folks? You're watching Onward with Onrie Live, and I'm your host, Onrie Compen. Today's guest is this very, very special person. In fact, he's so special that I agreed to work around his schedule and bring him on the show a little bit later, and because I really want to talk to him. So he is a writer, creator, and producer, just like myself. He's been hustling for a while now. I've known him for a couple years, but we've never actually had a chance to meet in person before. So today we're actually going to get to do that. Even though it's across the screen, at least we can see each other and do all that wonderful stuff. So everyone, please welcome Omar Morales to the show. How's it going, brother?
It's going great, man. Thank you so much for having me and for accommodating my my West Coast timing.
No worries, brother. Do us a favor. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
All right, so I'm a writer creator, just like you mentioned, working on indie comics. You know that hustle very well. Creating your own books. It taking a long time to create your own books as you juggle a family and a full-time job during the day, and then eventually getting to that point where you can put it out on a Kickstarter and putting your creations out into the world. So, in the last 5-6 years, I've put out just 2 books, right? I'm a kind of a low volume, high quality creator, if you will. First one I did was CRUZADER back in the day. This is actually the only copy that I have left, and it happens to be the very first copy that came off the assembly line. They marked it for me, very first copy, so I wanted to put that one aside. And then more recently, last year, I did a book called Moon Girl, because this first book, CRUZADER, was adult R. It's adult material. Blood, guts, and all that kind of thing. But I wanted to write one that my kids could read, right? And so I wrote this one called Moon Girl, which is based on a public domain character, and it's readable for ages like junior high, 6th, 7th, 8th, and on up. And this one's an old-fashioned sci-fi adventure, very much in the vein of like Golden Age books. And so I've got both of those books like on Comixology and Amazon Kindle. And I still have some print copies left of Moon Girl for sale off of my website, theforcemedia.com. And I have different covers, too. This is a Matt Harding cover. I think you know Matt Harding, right?
Of course I do. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
We've been neighbors.
So that's the Matt Harding cover. Yeah. And speaking of neighbors, one of my neighbors here in Pleasanton literally happens to live around the corner from me. I didn't even know it when I commissioned her. She did this cover for me. Yeah, it's a strange world, right? Like we start talking, and I go, "Hey, do you want to do this cover for me?" And then it turns out that she lives like literally right around the corner from me. Small world. So this is what I call the Golden Books cover. And then the last cover I have, it's a take on The Lion King. So this one's done by the interior artist, Joel Kotahar. So that's kind of what I've been working on the last, 5-6 years. And right now I'm in writing mode. So I have a new project. It's called Major Thomas. So it's a take on, the old rock song Major Tom about an astronaut who gets lost in space. And so right now it's a 12-page short story, which is going to show up in an anthology called MAñANA. And MAñANA is all creators from around Latin America or Latinos living in the US. So all the writers, all the artists, all the coloring, all the lettering, it's all done by Latinos. And it's going to be about what does the Latin American world look like in the 24th century or the 25th century, the year 2492. So what does it look like for Latinos 1,000 years after Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue? And that's kind of the theme of it. So so right now, that's a 12-page short story. That'll hit Kickstarter in July, MAñANA. And then I'm going to take that short story and blow it out into a full 100-page graphic novel, because I love the story. I love the characters. And I just wanted to see that story continue beyond what it is now, which is just a 12-page short story. So people will get a little flavor of what the story is in the short that I had to get compacted, into such a small amount of pages. But I have so many more ideas to flesh it out completely to 100 pages. So that's what's keeping me busy these days, Onrie. What about you, man?
Oh, man. Well, I wanted to go back to something you said, because you're talking about focusing on fewer projects so that you can focus on the quality of them. And that's something that's
Yes,
been
sir.
kind of, you know, I've been thinking about a lot lately, because we're all in creative. We're all trying at least to be in creative mode right now, because when else are we going to have time to really, sit in a secluded place and write or draw or whatever? But I find it that I don't have any desires to start new projects, because I'm very committed to what I've been doing with Yisun Shin, and we're working on our 10th issue right now, and I really
Congratulations.
well, it's funny because it's kind of like one of those things where it's the congratulations. It feels great, right? But then you got to do all the work, and it's like the work is essentially like the one thing that we never really we always take it for granted when we talk about it in passing. But when it actually comes down to sitting down and actually creating that comic and putting the time in, I think it's really admirable that you're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to focus on one project at a time. I'm not going to throw 7 darts at the board and hope I hit it bullseye. I'm gonna, really take my time to aim, so I hit my target, And I've seen your book, Crusader. You've sent me a copy of it, actually, which it's a beautiful book. Featuring artwork by the legendary Paul Gulacy on your cover.
Yes.
And that guy,
Yes.
we studied his artwork on Yisun Shin because when he worked on Masters of Kung Fu with Doug Mensch, his sequentials were just absolutely awesome. I mean, very loose sense of human anatomy and just really cool stuff. So how did you get in touch with Gulacy?
I love the way he draws eyes, by the way. They're not very oval. They're more like rectangular, the way he draws eyes. They're very distinct. Anyway, so he's been one of my favorite artists, like, ever. And when I thought about Crusader, I was like, man, like, I imagine the cover in my head, and I thought, like, who could really nail this? Who could really bring to life what I have up here, what I have in mind for this cover? And obviously he came to mind. And I thought, I'm gonna research this guy a little bit and see if he's accessible. And sure enough, he is. He has an AOL email address that's out there in the wild. And I just wrote to him. I said, "Hey, Paul, love your work. Would love to commission you for cover art for an indie book." And I told him what it was about. And guys like him are really busy, right? So I had to wait him out. Like, okay, I'm still here. Got the money, ready to pay. Like, just you tell me the when, and I'll wire you the money. And it was about like 9 or 10 months I was chasing after him. And then one day he said, "Look, I've got 2 days available. Like, are you ready?" I said, "Yes, I'm ready." And so I gave him a just chicken scratch, drawing of what I had in mind, wired him the money, and then 2 days later, that beautiful piece of perfection came to me, snail mail. He doesn't do any digital, right? He did it all on a board and mailed it to my house. And I remember seeing he had inked in the background, which is mostly black outer space, with marker. And at the time, I'd never done comics before, and I thought, oh my God, what is this going to look like when we scan it? Like, you can see the marker lines on it. Like, what? Sure enough, I took it to Kinko's. I said, can we just do a TIFF, high resolution TIFF? And when it came out, I was like, holy crap, why did I ever doubt this? Like, it was beautiful. The blacks were blacker than black. The whites were whiter than white. And it was just perfection. And so that's the story. Paul and I still keep in touch. He was very tickled to death because I took Crusader and I did like a giant version of it. Just the first chapter, right? Because the full book's like 156 pages. So I took the first 24 pages, the first chapter, and blew it up giant size and entered it to the Guinness World Records and got the record
that
for
is so
largest
fucking
comic
awesome.
book in the world.
Yes. And where is that largest comic book on display right now?
It's right here in my office.
Oh, it's in your office. I thought you had it on display in Jane Silent Bob's Secret Stash.
Well, yes, that's right. So so there was 100 copies made, right? That was the deal with Guinness.
Oh, so you made 100 copies of that?
Yeah. So this is the only one I have. Yeah, this is the only one I have left, which goes with me to shows, and it sits in my garage. But there are others out there in the wild, right? So the Guinness people have one in London. Jay and Silent Bob have one on display, like permanently. They've had it there for years as kind of a sideshow attraction, if you will. And I actually sent them one of the official Guinness certificates that I have, and to go along with the book. And then there's other shops too that have it. Most of my customers for that book actually weren't just like your average Joe reader. It was comic book shop owners that said, "Hey, I want one of those to have it up in my shop as like a novelty." So I get teased a lot that it's also in the world's most giant bag and board. It's got a giant Mylar plastic and a giant piece of cardboard in the back of it. So yeah, Paul, like he was like really into that because it got global notoriety, right? So my first book, I go from being, absolutely unknown, had never done a damn thing in comics, to being a world record holder. And so that brought a lot of attention with it. And that's how I started, building my community of fellow creators and friends, much like you.
Right on, man. Yeah, no, absolutely. I've always been, I always admired your strategy with that. I think that was very clever of you to do that. You actually, while we're on the show, one of our mutual fans who bought Moon Girl through Jen King's Space Cadets collection.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, he's interested in that copy of Crusader that you got, the last one. Are you selling that?
Well, it's the one I wanted to keep for myself.
Okay.
Well, let's get him PDF. It's the only one I have left.
No, of course. I understand.
Yeah.
It looks like things are going well.
Someday. Well, yeah, I mean, I don't go crazy. Like, I just do my print runs typically around 500, just to see how it goes, not get hung with too many books.
Yeah.
So, but they sold out, pretty quick. And then I did the same with Moon Girl, and now I'm down to my last few boxes of that as well. But yeah, let's get him a PDF, and we'll do it that way.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I'll put you guys. You might even know him, Richard Ship.
Oh yeah, I recognize the name.
Yeah. Hit him up on Facebook later on. I'm sure.
Yeah, I will.
He'll be more than happy to support you. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
And
what's one of the things I love about the digital versions is they live forever, right? They never run out. It's going to be on Kindle and Comixology, forever. And I actually got them on the Comixology Limited, both of them, Moon Girl and Crusader. So if you subscribe, you get to read it for free.
That's excellent. Absolutely. And you're right. Yes, that's the nice thing about digital. I think a lot of people, have an attachment to the print editions too. But there's nothing wrong with digital, and however you gotta get it out there, right?
Yeah. I just ran out of space here in my office. I had long boxes. They're full. My cabinets are full of long boxes. So I had to move over to digital a couple of years ago. And I do love print, obviously, but I ran out of space, so that's how I do my reading now.
That's awesome. So with your next project, the one that with Major Tom, which you've been
Major
talking
Thomas,
about, Major Thomas. I apologize. This is a very kind of like it's a culturally significant piece for you. It sounds like, and you're working on this now. What's the plan? How are you going to release this thing?
So right now, like I'm in like reading mode. I'm 70 pages into the 100, and the thing has been in my head, Onrie. You know how it is. It's like in your head. It's this living, breathing thing that you're constantly working on. Your brain just never turns off. And I finally just recently committed to writing it. It's been up here for like 3 years, and I've been working out little and plot holes and character development and how do I solve for this piece of the equation. And then one day, finally, I had my last piece that I had figured out, and that was right when COVID-19 started, and we're all trapped in our homes, And I said, okay, enough with the excuses. I'm gonna sit down and write this sucker. And man, the pages are flowing like 6 or 7 at a time. Boom, boom, boom. I mean, I've done these first 70 pages just in a matter of weeks because it's been up here for so long that it's just flowing, right? There's no writer's block. I don't have a Bible. I don't have.
It's a perfect catalyst. Yeah, the pandemic.
Yeah, and so I just have a basic outline of the pages, and boom, so I'm cranking it out. So my plan is, and this is a long-term plan, right? Because as I told you earlier, I've done 2 books the last 5-6 years, and this one I'm going to be working on probably for at least a couple of years. So I've never really pitched to a publisher. So I've told myself, you know what, with this one, let's maybe get the first 12 pages of artwork done. Maybe let's get them colored, let's get them lettered, and let's just see what it's like to gather and pitch, right? I think one of your previous guests, Trevor, was saying, like, you know, for every 10 no's, maybe you'll get to that 11th person that's a yes, right? So I figured, hey, I think I owe it to myself to try to pitch this to publishers and see what happens. And if they're a no, that's okay. I know how to do a Kickstarter, right? I know how to do my own distribution. I know how to get out there and hustle and get it into Comixology. And if I want to get the books into Diamond, I got Crusader into Diamond, you know, and that was a huge thrill, my first book ever, and got it out there into national distribution. But you know, if I do it on my own, then that's fine too. But I think I owe it to myself after 10 years being in this the indie game to give it a whirl and see if I can't get somebody to bite out there in the publishing world.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great way to build your network. You know, it's and the way I like to think of it too is it's more of like a supplemental thing, like, you know, having that direct distribution chain hooked up with Diamond, because, you know, selling independent comics, typically speaking, they don't really thrive in that market. You know, it's usually the Marvel and DC stuff that really kind of like picks up. But having that presence, I think, is important and essential, and definitely should not be disregarded. And like you said, you know how to hustle, and you know what you're doing when you go to, you know how to move your books. You've sold out of 2 print runs of both your books, and that's a huge thing. So how did you go about selling it? Was it just going to conventions? Do you do store signings, like a little bit of both?
All of it. Any which way I can find to sell a book, I'll do it, right? So conventions, and, you know, I never do overnight conventions. Like, I never fly anywhere to do a show. I do shows that I can drive to, where I don't have to pay for hotel or air or food, right? Like, I just work, and the Bay Area is rich with shows. You know, this area, Oakland,
Yeah,
you
guys got a show every weekend.
Yeah, literally. There's probably dozens of shows I don't even know about. There's so many, right? I also do book signings, right? I've got a great network of local shops in the Bay Area who have been very gracious to me over the years and having me in for signings. Free comic book day is a huge day for me, right? They'll give me a table, and you got a captive audience of a huge line of people, and sitting there selling your stuff. It's almost like unfair, right? Because, you know, at a convention, you're competing with so many other people, but at a free comic book, you know, and you're like maybe one of 2 guys that's there selling stuff, and people are stuck in the line, nothing to do, then you start chatting them up. You got a way better chance to sell books. So
it's interesting you talk about free comic book day, because I used to think of it as sort of like, why would people come to a store to get free comics and then think to themselves, well, I thought it was free comic book day. Why am I spending money now? But having done it for the past couple of years, I realize how lucrative the experience is. And regardless of anything, it's like you're getting a special type of audience that comes into these shops that normally don't go into stores. And this is your chance to, you know, part them, you know, pass your work on to them. So I totally understand, and I've come around to that thinking that, you know, this is something that is worth doing. Like, that's a great way to move product.
Yeah, and another little thing I've been doing lately, the last couple of years, is I'll go to a classroom. Like, I have a friend who's a 5th grade teacher, and he has me in every year to present how to make comics to the kids. So I'll sit there and give them like a little, you know, 4 or 5 point breakdown, you know, write the script, do the line art, do the coloring, do the lettering, and then printing or digital, whatever. And then I quiz them, you know, what are the steps? And then they ask me questions about, how did you come up with the character? And, you know, we have a nice little log. And, you know, I'll if I have a physical copy, I'll leave one behind for their library. And then and then I'll hand out like little postcards, and you'll be surprised the sales come from that too, because the parents go, oh, you know, you talked to my kid's class today, they're all into your book, like how can I buy one? And then, you know, I give them my website link, and then boom, they can buy it, you know, right from my website. And that's another way to do sales. I mean, you know what it's like, dude. You find any which way you can.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no,
do all of it.
Yeah, for sure. You know, so I have to say I've been learning a lot more since I've had since I've been running the show, and I learned something from every single guest, because, you know, everybody has something that they're particularly very good at. You know, that because we can't all be good at everything. We're not all perfect at stuff. Like, for example, with me, and I find one of my weakest areas to be crowdfunding. You know, it's not an area where I can come and do a crowdfunding campaign and just really fucking clean house like some of these guys are capable of doing. And, you know, there's so many little nuances that, you know, the one thing I'm looking forward to when the convention scene picks back up is applying all these lessons that I've learned to, you know, to what I'm doing, so that I can be better. I can get better, you know?
Yeah, there's so much knowledge to be gained by just networking and watching others. Like your sales technique is legendary, brother. Legendary.
I appreciate
You're out in
that.
front of your table. You are tracking down every living, breathing thing that walks past you, and you putting a book in their hand, and you are demonstrating the product. Like, I've never been at a show with you, but I've already heard about the legend of Onrie and how it gets out there. And then once the books are sold out, the empty box goes upside down and the sword comes out, and you're proclaiming victory, dude. I love that. I want to see it in person one day.
Hey, you know what?
I want to
see how. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to that myself. But aside from that, I'd like to be next to you, so that, you know, we can work and learn from each other. You know, I think that some of the best shows I have are the ones where I'm with enthusiastic neighbors who are also very passionate and vigorous about getting their books out there, because there's no reason why, if someone buys Eastern Shin, that they can't buy Moon Girl or Crusader, you know, or, you know, I've seen people, and especially with Crusader, there's a lot that there's a lot of commonalities that it has with Eastern Shin. It's an action-based book. The art style is kind of similar in a lot of ways, and, you know, you're tackling, you know, history in some way, not directly, but I mean, you know, an agent of the Vatican.
Yeah, there's lots of references. Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, so tell me a little bit more about Crusader, because, you know, where did it seems like it's a character that really resonates with you, and it's kind of like your answer to a lot of the injustices of the world. I'm just curious to talk to you about.
Okay, so I went to Catholic school 13 years, right? Kinder through 12, right? So that was like the first pillar of my life was Catholicism. A second pillar, you could argue, was like the Oakland Raiders. And then a third pillar was probably like the Nintendo Entertainment System, right? So, you know, just like most kids that grew up in the 80s, right? Star Wars, comics, cartoons, Saturday morning cartoons, WWF wrestling. These are the things that formed us as individuals. So when I got serious about writing my first comic, write what you know, right? And I thought, okay, well, I know Catholicism. I know I love action and adventure because I love Star Wars and, you know, video games, and I grew up reading Marvel comics just like everybody else. So I thought, okay, what were your an adventure story?
Well, what were your favorite Marvel titles? I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm just curious. I always ask that.
No, please. Yeah. Well, as a kid, Spider-Man. All day long.
My man.
Spider-Man.
Yes. I was hooked on Spidey myself.
1966 cartoon.
Oh yeah, hell yeah! I used to watch that shit. Oh man,
God, every day. Like I used to get so petrified that someone's going to take off his mask. Like that was my biggest fear in life, is somebody's going to take off his mask and find out that it's Peter. That was like my worst fear in life. So, and then as I got into junior high, I started to get really into Wolverine, right? Because, you know, Wolverine's the man, right? So
Wolverine's the shit, dude.
And in that time. And then, you know, Wolverine was really coming into his own, right? He was becoming a badass and getting his title, and then multiple titles just on his own. And then as I got older, probably when I was discovering comics after college, I became a huge Captain America guy. And so that's my guy right now, is Cap. So, these are big, huge tentpole, characters. And, I'm pretty mainline when it comes to my comics, and on the DC side, I like Batman. To me, he reads like a Marvel character because he's so intricate and so dense, and he's got, psychology that you can really relate to. So yeah, that's what I read growing up. And so my first kind of iteration of Crusader was that it was two ways. It was a cop who was working undercover trying to hunt down the Klan in New Orleans, and he was working together with a priest. And then at one point I said, well, I'm just going to marry those two into one. I'm going to make this priest like a badass, like a vigilante. And then I thought, well, okay, but what would be his motivation for this? And then I thought, what if the Pope had like a right-hand man, a secret agent that nobody knows about, who just works in the shadows and in the darkness like Batman, right? And that's how it started forming. And so I thought, okay, he's going to live at the Vatican, but the Pope's going to like dispatch him all over the world to go do stuff. And action, like number one issue, go hunt down the Klan because they're getting active again in Boston, and they're bothering people in the diocese around Boston. So that's where number one drops. You drop right in and meet this guy, and he's beating up on the Klan. Relevant even right now, right? Because racism and outward racism, violent racism. I mean, you're reading stories on Facebook about Black people dying, right? For no good reason other than that
that poor man who was shot a couple weeks ago by those fucking lunatics. I agree. Yeah, it's out there.
Yeah, and I was reading a story today about a FedEx driver who got refused because the customer receiving the packages is white, and he didn't want a Black driver, and they had this confrontation. It's like, really? How is this still happening? So to your point, yes, Crusader was my answer to the injustice of racism in the first issue. And then, I start exploring other themes, right? Like aliens. I'm a big believer that aliens is a real thing, and that
come on,
they've been here probably for thousands of years, and they'll always be around.
That's such malarkey. There's no way in the infinite space that there could possibly be anything other than humans that exist. I only living things are on this planet. Damn it. Well, actually. Right. Throughout all this, didn't the military just like a couple weeks ago announce that like UFOs are real? Like they just dropped the bomb. Like they're not hiding it anymore. So yeah, okay. So aliens is like that's been another thing. So how do you see aliens?
I see them just as other creatures of God, man. Like people ask me, like, well, how can you believe in alien life if you're Catholic and you believe in Jesus and all that? It's like there's no conflict for me, man. Like those are our brothers and sisters out in the universe. And I even want to say that the Pope himself has said the same thing. Like if there's life out there, those are our brothers and sisters in God, right? And so I see conflict. I hope they're nice. I hope they're friendly. And if we meet someday, I hope we can all get along. But you never know. You never know. There could be good ones, there could be bad ones. Just like here on planet Earth, right? We've got good people, we've got bad people. It's probably no different.
Yeah, I think
alien life.
Yeah, I would say it's all circumstantial. And the one thing I've been kind of thinking about lately is our tenacity. Not tenacity. Sorry, our tendency. That's the word. Jesus, what's with me tonight? And I'm sorry. Here I am using dropping the J word to a devout Catholic. I've
done it myself. I apologize. We're all sinners, man. I've dropped the J bomb and the G bomb. Yes.
No, but we have this tendency to either look at someone as being innately good or innately bad. Like I've been watching The Last Dance lately. I don't know if you've seen it yet. The documentary about the Chicago Bulls.
Yes.
And obviously the focal point is Jordan. And I never saw him. You can't see any of these guys, even Stan Lee, who I have an immense amount of respect for. You can't see these guys as people without flaws, because when they present themselves, they're presenting themselves as role models for the rest of the world. But behind those closed doors, they're still like all of us. They're human, and they are, they have their flaws. They do things that, other people can scrutinize. I mean, I'm not perfect. Shit, there's plenty of problems with me, and I think it's
everybody
important.
does.
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of see that because, for example, like I have a lot of friends who are in law enforcement. I know that law enforcement, there's some people who are really shitty. There's some really bad cops out there, but I personally know very good police officers. They got into this field because they genuinely want to do a service. They want to help their communities. And there's something to be said about that. So, to say someone is innately good or bad, it's I agree with you when it comes to aliens. Like, yeah, probably there's some good ones and there's some bad ones, but hopefully we can all get along. Hopefully we don't get abducted and have stuff shoved up our ass, because I'm really not looking forward to that. I don't like stuff shoved up my ass.
Me neither.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of your ambition and how you've brought this character to life, you're also a family man. So you got 2 kids and you're juggling this life as a comic book creator, and and you also have a job on the side as well, that helps you. How do you manage everything?
It's hard, man. So like today, literally, before we got on the air today, I was like down to the wire, like, okay, like I got to finish my day job, and then like I got to shove some food in my mouth. I got to go change my shirt, and like, and then I was thinking, what do I need for equipment? Okay, I gotta have the laptop plugged in. I need my earbuds. Okay, I gotta have my phone just in case the laptop doesn't work. And then I thought, oh, my books, like I need to show my books. So I got to hustle in the garage and get my books out, and I, get the world's largest, out right here over my shoulder. And so I'm just constantly sprinting from thing to thing to thing, right? Before COVID-19, it'd be like hustling to take my son to karate, on Saturdays, or are very active in like, she's like in productions, and she's in the choir, and she does plays, and she does technical. She's now like being trained to be a stage manager and a director, and so she's highly active. She actually has a job with the city of Pleasanton here where we live. At 15 years old, already has a paying job doing theater, and doing what she loves.
Wow.
And then yeah. So, my wife and I are constantly running around and like taking them to school, picking them up, taking them, here and there. So really a lot of my writing I save for the weekends. And so Saturday, I'll try to bang out 6 or 7 pages. Sunday, same thing. I try to bang out 6 or 7 pages. And right now, there's no sports to distract us. We're home a lot because we have to be. So right now is actually a great time for me in terms of creating comics. It's when it's normal hustle and bustle time where it slows down for me. And so the writing part of it, it gets done fairly early, as in the process. And then the long part is waiting for pages, and then waiting for revisions, and then there comes inks, and then colors. Like this is why it takes me 2-3 years to do a book, because the people I'm working with are in the same boat as me. They can't crank it out. They're not doing 6 or 7 pages a day of art. They might be doing 1 or 2 a week, and then things get in the way, and there's delays. There's always delays. So yeah, that's kind of how I manage, is like in fits and spurts. If I have 10 minutes here or an hour there, I take it. I'm hungry for that 10 minutes. I'm ready for that minutes. It's my favorite 10 minutes of the day is when I'm working on my own stuff, because you know why? I'm my own boss of my own comic. I'm the CEO. I'm the only one making decisions on it. And I love that autonomy that you don't have in corporate life, because you got a boss who has a boss who has a boss who has a boss, and then you have politics, and then you have competing priorities, and it's just corporate life is a mess, man.
Yeah, well, it can be. I worked corporate prior to getting into comics, and I learned a lot from working corporate. Like, I would say I wouldn't be who I am or where I am if I didn't have my corporate job, because those were my formative years. And what you really learn in those environments is what not to say in front of people, and really how to kind of keep yourself as central as possible when it comes to things that could get conflicting. Like, I learned from working corporate, never talk about politics, religion, and
all of which we've done today.
Yes, absolutely. I did, and I said Jesus.
But we're homies.
Say Jesus. Yes, we're homies. Yeah, but meaning in a sense that, politics. Did we talk about politics? We talked about the KKK, kind of. But that's not really politics, though.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But nowadays it kind of is becoming part of the political scene, though. Like, remember those guys that had a march in Virginia? They had their white hoods, man. They had their torches, and and then Trump said that they were great, upstanding people. Like, no, dude. A lot of them were outed as Klansmen.
No, absolutely. Those guys, they're wackadoos, and I don't even, I don't have time for that shit. But it's kind of like, when it comes to it on a general level, I always make it a point not to sway in one direction or another, because I think that you're secluding people that way. I feel like you're, and you're not, and that's the first thing. And the second thing is, nothing I say or do is going to change people's opinions about that. You know what I mean? So if I tell people that I feel this way, they're not going to suddenly start thinking the way I do, because I think that that's kind of the problem, is that we're so stuck on and fixated on seeing things the way we see them that we ignore the fact that people have a completely different point of view on things, and that they're in completely different positions. Like, if you look at any Klansman, if you think about it, and I'm not trying to sympathize with them or empathize with them or anything, but why are they the way they are? They're the way they are because of the environment that they grew up in, and we don't get to choose that.
Nature and nurture.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
Like, let's say you're born in North Korea. It's like, you didn't get to choose that you were going to be born in North Korea. That's where you were fucking born. That's where it happened, and that's where your life is now.
Yep.
And you may never know anything outside of it. You may not want to ever know anything outside of it, because that you grow up in a world where you don't necessarily care about those other things. You have everything that's necessary, and it's kind of, this whole situation is kind of like a reminder of, like, to appreciate the things that we have.
Yeah, and I wanted to pick up on something that you said, which is important about corporate life and the things that you learn there. I also will say I would not be the creator that I am today were it not for my corporate experience. Right, I worked in in the headquarters of a major supermarket chain in their private label department. So all the store brands that they own, right, that compete with the national brands. That's what I was working on for 10 years of my life, and I learned product development, product launch, marketing plan for the launch, life cycle planning, negotiation, contract negotiation, the full gamut, right? The 4 Ps, they call it: price, product, promotion, placement. I learned all those values, which helped me so much when it came to doing Crusader, because I already had that business mentality, and I learned and I knew the importance of a diamond and a comiXology as these major arteries, and then looking into the more local angles, right? The shows and book signings and going to the classrooms. Like, I had almost like a master's degree in how to do business, and I applied these macro things that I learned doing private label product development and marketing and sales, and applied them to my comics life, and it has been such an advantage. And I don't want to knock anybody, but you see a lot of folks out there that are artsy, but they don't really do the business side.
No, they don't. They really don't.
At the show, and they're just looking down at their phone the whole time, or just drawing and not engaging. I'm out in front of my table. Nobody, they might walk by me and they might not want to talk. They may not want to talk to me.
It happens more often than not. Yeah. It happens.
Smiling, and I'm ready to engage. Yeah. Right. And I have my 30-second elevator pitch ready. And, these are all the things that I did learn in corporate life. So yes, I agree. And thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, absolutely. And, to kind of go on that, it's like, it takes a lot to do what we do, to get up in front of your table and to put yourself out there, because.
And stand for 8 or 9 hours, right?
Oh, I fucking love it. I love it. I'm missing it so much. bring the pain back. You know, I miss it.
Yeah.
I fucking love it. But, you know, but there's another side to it too. It's like, you know, even in the hard times, and there are hard times, you kind of feel like you're that solicitor out on the street, or like, hey, I could tell you how you could save $20 on your cable bill every month. You know, it's like, you don't ever want to make yourself feel like that guy, but those tactics are important. Like what you were talking about with the 4 Ps, you know, applying those skills that you learn in the corporate world really do help with what you're doing, because that's how shit sells that's how shit is always sold. That's why they're still using these kinds of tactics. And you're in an atmosphere where you can learn this stuff and apply it to something that you really care about, like comics. And you know, I think that where comics was pre-pandemic and where it'll be post-pandemic, I think we're starting to see this field really, really blossom, and in a way that it never has had a chance to before, because of all the censoring that was put in comics, you know, since what was it, 2001, I think, when they finally removed the Comics Approval Code, or the Comics Code Authority, you know, that shit.
Somewhere around in there, yeah.
Yeah, but like, I mean, prior to that, it's just like you couldn't get books out there unless they met that criteria. That limited the amount of stuff that was being published, for sure. You know, I don't think Eastern Shin would have been able to thrive in that kind of environment. And you know, I think the world was in a different place then, but we're in a much more open, culturally embracing world now. You know, it doesn't matter. You know, I've sold books all over the country, and, you know, to people of all backgrounds. I may have even sold you know, somebody who is, you know, from, you know, that white purebred background or whatever. You know, I don't know. It's just like, you never really think about it when you go to all these different places. And I think it's important that we never judge people for, you know, like, what they appear to be, but we think about them as, hey, they're gonna like my book, and my book might maybe everything I want to say about my feelings about the world, politics, and everything, it's all in here. You just gotta find it. You know, you gotta really pay attention.
You're
to it.
Right.
Yeah. So
that was one of the things I learned early on too, is to write a story that you love, that you would be into, because there's sure to be other people like you that will love it too, and that's who you're writing for. And so I take that approach with all my books. I do something that I would be totally into, and you're right, you weave your stories, your ideas and your feelings about the world subtly. Like Moon Girl, you know, I wrote that book so that 10 and 12-year-olds could read it, but I very subtly wove my ideas about the world into that book, and if you're looking for it, you'll find it.
And it's interesting, Moon Girl, because you know, that's a very different project than Crusader. Tell us a little bit more about Moon Girl. Yeah. I mean, aside from the fact that it's more intended for kids, but like, you know, what's really the premise, and bring me into this world?
Yeah. Okay, so it's a public domain character. So Matt Harding, he wanted to do an anthology full of public domain characters from like the 1930s and 40s that everyone has forgotten, and he wanted to revive them. And the name of the anthology was Not Forgotten, dusting off these old 100-year-old heroes that have been lost to time. That, you know, the publishers that made them are all expired, right? The only two that survived, Marvel and DC from back in the day. And all these other little EC comics and all these other ones that were around in the 20s and 30s, they're all gone. And so all these characters now belong to the world. They're public domain. So he said, wouldn't it be cool to just revive them all and do like an old-fashioned, you know, type of storytelling and put them all together in an anthology? So I pitched for it, and I picked Moon Girl. She was like a Wonder Woman type of character, kind of like a generic Wonder Woman. And I said, I'm going to redo her story, because that origin story that she had from back in the day, it was very vanilla and very just much like a rip off of Wonder Woman. So I'm going to make her a little girl instead of an adult. And I'm going to show how she became Moon Girl and how she comes from a lineage of these queens from the moon where everyone that lives on the moon, under the surface of the moon, is women. There's no men there. And so I thought that was fascinating. So I just let my mind go wild on that with sci-fi and alien theory, and the ancient alien theory, meaning that, you know, the earth has been inhabited by beings for hundreds of thousands of years. And so the book actually takes place like 1,000,000 years ago, a long time ago in outer space, right? Like the beginning of Star Wars. And it shows how humanity came from the moon, actually, because there was a sophisticated society of women living underground. And then when they flee to Earth, because of a conflict that's happening on the moon, a political conflict between women that want to have men and the women who are like, no, we're cool. Like, we have a peaceful society without men. So there's this huge conflict. So some of them have to flee to Earth, and then we come to Earth and it's prehistoric times. And they leave behind all this technology and clues about how there was humanity back in prehistoric times, sophisticated humanity. And they leave artifacts behind. And then later on, you know, like current times, we start to find these artifacts and uncover, as we do better archaeology and have ground penetrating radar, we can see that there are things under there that are, it's like there's no explanation. They're so sophisticated. How could this have been cave people, right? So I wove a lot of my thoughts about the ancient alien theory into Moon Girl, and wrapped it up in this very easy to digest, easy to read story that's fun, very Buck Rogers with pew pew and zip zip and, you know, spaceships that look like they're straight out Buck Rogers, and, you know, so I had fun with it. You know, I had fun with it. It was totally different, you're right, from Crusader, and it was something I wanted to do more for my kids. Major Thomas, that I'm working on now, is something more in the middle, right? Not really for kids, but it's not really rated R. Let's call it PG-13, you know. That's going to be a little bit edgier. It's going to be not necessarily for kids. And so I'm having fun now doing that type of story. So, you know, three different types of projects, but, you know, my voice is the same in all of them. I think if you took my name off of all of them and you know me and you read them all, you'd say, yeah, that comes from the same guy.
Yeah, you know, as I've been hearing you speak about this, particularly with Moon Girl, you know, one thing I was thinking about is you gotta find some way to relate to the audience, and I think that's especially when you're talking about kids. You know, if there's no way to relate to them, then it doesn't matter that it was a character that was made 100 years ago. In fact, it becomes even less relevant and even more boring. You want to find ways. That's what I think is the trickiest thing with us being comic book creators, is how do we make our stories interesting in a world where every comic shop is inundated with new content on a weekly basis, and you know, you got to find that way to keep your stuff fresh and to still have fun with it too, because you don't want to get lost in the translation of how can I be different. I mean, essentially, no one is. It's all been done before, right? I mean, you know, like I don't think that there's any original idea out there, but it's how you pull it off. It's when you're making people think that this is one thing, but then suddenly you veer off and it can be something else. And when you're doing stuff with kids, I think that there's a special innocence there, because you want to keep it simple, you want to keep it direct, but you still want to have fun with it. And it's kind of like Shrek, for example. It's like, it's a little bit of something for everybody. So if, let's say, a dad is reading to his daughter, there's something in it for him too. And I think that all ages content, it's like, it's a tough nut for me to crack, because I'll admit that's not my strong suit. I don't know how to do it all ages stuff, you know?
Yeah, well, the trick that I used is I had the colorist Paula Goulart from Brazil stain the pages so that they looked like they were 100 years old. So she used these fading and yellowing techniques to make the pages look like they were like a 100-year-old comic that was like sitting out there and it's all yellowed. And then used, you know, great line art from Joel Kotahar to attract the adult readers to say, wow, this artwork looks fantastic, you know. And but then the story is digestible enough for, you know, a junior high kid to be able to read it. And, you know, I didn't dumb it down. Like, you know how back in the day Stan Lee would write and not dumb it down, and he would use adult words? Like, he might use a word like opaque, and you don't know what that means, and then you run to the dictionary, opaque. Oh, that means kind of see-through and clear. Oh, okay, I get it now. You know, and you're learning.
I actually didn't know.
Like Stan
You
was
just told me.
challenging us to learn.
I don't even have to read Stanley's work. You just told me what opaque means. I didn't know until now. I'm gonna start using that word more opaque. I like words that start with O because our names start with O, right?
Boom.
Boom.
My nickname most of my life was O-Dog.
Oh, there you go. Hey, I go by O-Dog too sometimes.
O-D-O-double-G.
Yeah, that's right.
Give it up, man. Give it to me, man. Give it to me.
So about your production process, you mentioned that with you were trying to get how involved are you in the actual? Well, obviously you're involved, but how much input do you give to your creators? Like for Eastern Shin, I draw the layouts for the artist. I provide very specific instructions. How are you with that? Do you trust the artist and just say, you know what, have fun, or are you kind of like, no, I want it this way?
I'm hands-on. Okay. I visualize every panel like a movie director, right? I know what I want. I know where I want the camera to be. And so I give very specific instructions in my scripts. Extreme close-up, eyes only, you know, or close-up, face only, medium, you know, torso and head, you know, or wide angle. All that stuff, man. Like I treat it like I'm making a movie, right? And,
so you're seeing it in the script form. So like, yeah. So
I'm really hands on. Like I do give the artist some latitude, though. You know, put it this way: if they make a change that I think changes my story and I don't agree with it, I'll tell them, hey, we need to change this. And then that's when I get on the board and I'll draw it for them and say, this is what I'm looking for. But if they make a change that, you know, enhances or maybe puts a subtle twist on what I had on mind and it works, then I let them go with it. But yeah, I'm very involved. You know, I think my scripts are detailed enough where it comes across. But yeah, I mean, there's always corrections. You know, it's never like 100% perfect on the first try. And then sometimes too, there's language barriers, right? A lot of the people I work with are in foreign countries, right? The Philippines or Brazil or wherever. And so sometimes things get lost in translation. And so like, just I'll draw out for them, you know, and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. So yeah, I'm very involved because to me, it's playing out as like a movie in my head. And I want it to look that way and feel that way so that my true vision comes across in the end. I know there's some writers that are, you know, very sparse in their panel descriptions and they just kind of let the artist run with it, and that's cool too. But
I don't think there's I don't think that there's any wrong method to this. You know, I think that's something that, like, I mean, there's shit that sucks. Don't get me wrong. It's not saying like everything that comes out is perfect. There's plenty of shitty comics out there, but and you can tell because you see, there's a difference between someone saying, I'm going to write a sparse script and give the artist a chance to just do whatever he wants, but I'm really going to hone in on the dialogue. I'm really going to hone in on certain things that are being said between the characters. And therefore you get a book that is told by the artist, but written by the writer, and has very sharp dialogue and very, you know, brilliant art. But then you also have scripts where, you know, the writer is so cocky, thinks so highly of himself that he gives sparse details in his script and just has really boring, you know, run-of-the-mill dialogue where you can almost tell exactly what characters are going to say to each other. And, you know, I think that if you show up to play. If you ain't going to show up to play, then you know, you got nothing to complain about.
My attitude is this: the artwork has to carry the story, meaning like. And I had a guy compliment me once. He said, hey, man, I was reading Crusader on my iPad at work. So I had to be very subtle because I was working. So I could only really just kind of scan pages. I didn't really have time to read. But he's like, I could tell what your story was without even really reading it. The artwork told me the story.
Yes.
You know, the dialogue was just the details. And I learned
the dialogue are the details that are not in the artwork that enhance it. You're 100% right. Yes.
Yes, sir. And I learned that working in television. So coming out of college, I'd studied communications, and my first couple years out of college, professionally, I worked in TV news. And in small markets, you do everything, right? You do the camera, you do the editing, you run the live truck. You're we would call it a one person band. And a producer one time told me, he said, "Look, man, don't worry. I know you're just learning, but just listen to me on this." He said, "Let the video drive the story. Your job as the reporter is to gently guide it along. Let the sound bites, let the natural sound of what you're shooting, tell the story. Let the pictures move the story forward. Your job is there to just very gently guide it along. You don't want to dominate with your voice. You don't want to be given a 1 minute stand up. Your stand up should maybe 10 seconds, 20 seconds at the most, but let the other people tell the story, the people that you're interviewing."
Yeah, there is
the natural environment.
Yes, absolutely. You got to
So that was one thing. And, and then doing camera work too, I learned a lot about framing and angles and height and establishing shot, and then, all that stuff. So really, that, and then the corporate stuff really combined well for when I finally got serious about doing my own comics. I had a great foundation with these life experiences, and it's turned out pretty well so far. And I love it, man. I love making comics. I'll make comics until the day I get buried 6 feet underground.
I hear you, brother. I'm
and
right
I
there
see
with
so
you.
many people. Yeah, and I see so many people that get discouraged and they quit. And people ask me, like, "What's your advice on comics?" I go, "I only have one piece of advice. That's it. Don't quit." I'm not qualified to give any other advice, but that's the one thing I do know is don't quit. Keep going. And I love it, man. It's so fun that if I'm breaking even and my family's not suffering because of this addiction called making comics, then I'm good. My goal is break even. If someday I make a few bucks off of it, great. But that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I love storytelling. And before we run out of time, Onrie, I gotta tell a story about how you and I became friends.
Absolutely, please.
You were running this website called Freedable, where you were offering #1 issues or short stories or whatever for free, right? And you and I had just met on Twitter or something. And the moment we became homies, I said on email, "Onrie, just like pimping, comic booking ain't easy, but it's necessary." And you were like, "My man, you are good people." And we were fast friends since 2015 or whatever it was, just off of that one quote, man.
Absolutely. No, dude, honestly, I've always respected you in that regard.
Likewise.
You get it. And I wish that we could have met for the first time on the floor, but because this is the first time we're actually talking to each other.
Someday.
And someday it'll happen, man. And when it does, we're both gonna sell out. That's the proclamation I'm making right now.
Boom.
We're both gonna.
I'm gonna bring one of my I'm gonna bring one of my
Hell
lightsabers, right? And we're gonna empty the boxes, and then we're gonna cross swords and take a picture. It's gonna be awesome.
Absolutely, brother. Do me a favor. Now that we're out of time, do us a favor. Tell us where we can find you. One last shout out. This is your moment in the spotlight. You take it.
Yeah. All right. So my website has like everything, right? It's got all the links to all my social media. So theforcemedia.com, right? Theforcemedia.com. It'll have links to my Twitter. My Twitter is @theCruzader with the Z, just like you see over my shoulder here. Instagram, same thing, _Cruzader. But that's all linked off of my website. So you can find me there. I sell my books there. I have PDFs of Cruzader and Moon Girl. I also have some print copies of Moon Girl available. It's not a very deep, thick website. It's got just a few links on it, a purchase page, some artwork, and then just a little bit about me on the main page. But that's really the best way to find me, Twitter and Instagram. I'm also on Facebook, Omar Morales. I'm sure I'm already friends with I think almost 5,000 of you at this point out there in Facebook world. So I'm around, man. I'm always happy to chat and talk about comics, man, and the creation of comics and the love of everything that is comics, right? As a fan, as a reader, as a writer, a creator, as a fellow part of this ecosystem of people that are putting out content. And we're like in the golden age of indie comics, right? Because now we have access to put our stuff out there, and it's easier than ever. So I encourage anybody and everybody who's interested in making comics to give it a try. There's only one way to learn, and that's to do it, right? You want to make comics? Okay, go make comics, and then don't quit.
Very well said, and I agree with everything. And I look forward to chatting with you more backstage. So just hang out real quick. I'm going to close out. All right, hang on, buddy.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. What a great episode. I'm telling you, my man he's got the goods. Go out and support him right now. Pick up his book. Tomorrow we got Alton Simpson coming on the show. He's in the middle of a Kickstarter campaign for his excellent comic book series, Vampires of New Jersey. And I'm going to talk to him tomorrow about it. This will be the first time that I have face-to-face chat with the guy. So I will see you guys later. It's been a long day. I got to go home and get some rest. So I'll see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. We're back on our regular scheduled time. I will see you guys then. And until that time comes, onward to victory.
Boom.
Boom. Boom shakalaka.